Hi, thanks for watching the sermon on YouTube. We'd like to invite you to come to church, though. We meet every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. at Crosspoint Community Church. And may God bless you.
Crete by the Apostle Paul. Now you might think that, who wouldn't want to go to a Greek island? And who wouldn't want to get left all to yourself on a Greek island? But I would tell you, if there's any Greek island, and I've been to some Greek islands, any Greek island you probably don't want to go to, it's Crete. Especially when Titus was dropped off there. You see, Crete was this isolated island, large though it may be, isolated, and it didn't really have much infrastructure. So you had these, although you're an island, almost every little village itself was an island because it was so hard to get around on the island. As we see in the passage today, the people that lived there were not the nicest in the world. In fact, one of their own poets, as we saw in that passage, says, all Cretans are liars, evil beasts, and lazy gluttons. Now, if you were to open up a Fodor's travel book, and you were going through islands that you might want to visit in Greece, and one of them says, if you enjoy liars, evil beasts, and lazy gluttons, Crete is the place for you. Titus and Paul were there, and Titus gets dropped off, and he's waving goodbye, to Paul, and he's got a few rudimentary ideas of what he's supposed to do on this island. I'm sure Paul gave him kind of a thumbnail sketch. He says, straighten this mess out. That's probably all he said. And he says, as soon as I get to a place, I'll write you a letter and give you some things that you need to do. And so Titus has been waiting for that parchment to come, that scroll to come. You have it in your hands. It's the book of Titus. Every day he would go down to the harbor perhaps, and like any soldier, especially one soldier that's in a foreign country, the thing you look forward to most every day is mail call. And he would go down and they would offload the letters, the scrolls that had been sent, that arrived on the boat, and they would call out the names of the recipients. Day after day after day, he never heard his name called. Until one day, as he's thinking it's going to be a day like many other days with no letter, no instructions from Paul, he hears, letter for Titus. He perks up and he runs to the ship and he grabs this precious epistle from the man that has discipled him. He doesn't want to open it up right there at the boat. It seems like too cheap of a place, so he perhaps squirrels himself away someplace else on an island. Maybe a quiet place where you can hear the ocean as it's lapping on the beaches. You can hear the birds flying overhead, and he's there in God's creation. He's going to open this letter, and he opens the letter up. And he begins reading it, and just like Paul starts off and says, Titus, I need to remind you of what our mission is, what the purpose of the church is. And he gives us that purpose. See, the saints were a little upset. But he gives us the purpose of why he was left there. See, the purpose of the church, as I've shared with you in the past, is threefold. It's to become the means by which unbelievers come to belief in Messiah and the message. Secondly, to nurture their understanding of the truth so that it results in godly behavior. And then to help them overcome every challenge until they realize their eternal destiny. That's what he talks about. And Titus might have said, it's just like you, Paul. You're not going to get too far away from the mission. The mission, the mission, the mission. That's our mission today. He keeps reading and he says, in verse 4, to my beloved son, and then he goes on, he says, but there's certain personnel that you're going to need to do this. One of the things that he tells them, not only to set things in order, but to appoint certain men that would be leaders in the church. Men who had their home life, personal life, and church life somewhat in order. That they were above reproach, that they were growing in their faith. But I want you to pay particular attention to this next verse before we get into the passage today of what Paul reminds Timothy that church leadership is supposed to do. He says in this passage, he says, holding fast. That is to hold on to the faithful word. And that comes from the word logos. It's God's expression, who God is. To hold fast the faithful word, which is in accordance with the teaching. The teaching of whom? Of Jesus and then the apostles. To hold fast to the apostolic teaching that came from Paul the apostle. But they'll also be able to exhort in sound doctrine. That word sound doctrine is the word hugiaino. It's the word that we use for hygienic or healthy. Doctrine that is healthy rather than doctrine that is unhealthy. He says, I also want you to be able to refute those who contradict. That's interesting because it is a compound word, anti-lego. And you see, lego is where that word, the word, comes from. So he's able to that you are able to refute those who contradict anti-lego, God's revelation. See, God has revealed himself through Jesus and the apostles to us, and you have that in the Bible. It's what we call apostolic authority and apostolic doctrine. But on Crete, there were those that were rejecting that. They were what we call false teachers. So right now, Titus is going to learn how he can begin to detect a false teacher. So in these next 3 verses, there's several things that all of us need to be aware of, that there are false teachings out there. Now I want you to look in verse 10, the very first verse, and I want you to notice what he says. We're going to spend a little time just in 1:10. He says, for there are many rebellious men. The first thing you need to know is there is a mass of false teachers out there. There is the lie is much bigger percentage-wise than the truth. Let me say that again. The lie is much bigger percentage-wise than the truth. In fact, it's easier for you to find the lie than to find the truth. Jesus said we should seek and search. You don't have to seek and search for lies. They're all over the place. In fact, in John the 8th chapter, it speaks of Satan, and he is called the father of the lie. You see, the lie is a virus that is spread throughout society and culture. It is opposed to the truth which was revealed through Jesus to the apostles, and it's in your Bible. There are a plethora of non-Christian religions out there. Think about Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam. They all are variants or strains of the virus, the lie. They are not the truth. But I want you to also think, if you will, about all the so-called, I'm going to call it Christian aberrations, that say they're Christian, but they really aren't Christian, such as Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, Christian Scientists, which are neither Christian nor scientific. You see, there is so many more. There is so much, the lie is so much bigger than the truth, and everyone is carrying the lie except those who have believed the truth. You see, so he was reminding Titus that, Titus, there are more people that have been infected with the lie on your island that have been infected with the truth from heaven. The second thing that he points out because of that is their mindset. How did they get infected? How do you get infected with the virus lie? You must ask yourself that question, because some of you, to some degree, have probably contracted some form of the lie, and you're carrying it right now. You don't know it. There may be a slow incubation period, but it will eventually affect how you live your life. Now, if you think that this is one of the verses in the Bible, cleanliness is next to godliness, you've been infected. But there's all these variant forms of the lie that are floating around outside in our culture, in our society, and in fact, in some of your hearts. Where did it come from? It came from, and notice the word that he uses, for there are many rebellious men. That word rebellion in the Greek has the idea, if you will, of being unaccountable, of being unanchored, of being untethered, of being unhooked from apostolic authority and doctrine. You see, these rebellious men were not those that were putting a peace sign up. These weren't the ones that were in the 1776 rebellion. These were men that were rebelling against the truth of the Bible, given by the Apostle Paul. You see, when it says they're rebelling, they are unhinging themselves, unhooking themselves from apostolic authority and apostolic doctrine. Soon as they do that, they moved away and the virus begins to infect. Now let me tell you something. Watch this. You will drive down your ability to resist the lie to the degree that you're not infecting yourself with the truth. You see, truth is an antibody to the lie. And if you are not daily getting a dose of truth, you are susceptible to the lie. When was the last time you took your truth antibody? Were you in the Word today? Did you get it maybe once this week? You see, we think that we're unsusceptible to the lie. You are not. Unless you're continually ingesting the truth. You see, these men, because they had unhinged, unhooked, untethered, unanchored from the apostolic authority of the Apostle Paul and the other apostles, and because they had unhooked from apostolic doctrine, they were making it up as they went. They had become so infected that they didn't even know they were sick. So the first thing you need to know is most people are infected. There is more lie out there than there is truth out there. Second thing you must understand, that you get infected when you start rebelling against the revealed Word of God. You see, when you read Scripture and you say, well, yeah, that was written 2,000 years ago. You can't expect me to believe this stuff today, do you? That virus finds a little place in your heart. Now, I want you to notice the third thing he says. Not only the mask, the mindset, but I want you to notice their mouth. Notice what he calls these false teachers, and one way that you can look at these false teachers, they are what? What does it call them? Empty talkers. empty. The word empty means vain or without filling. I just saw, on I was watching a news show, and Cynthia says, "Oh yeah, I know all about that." But apparently, I don't buy cosmetics for myself, but apparently, not that there's anything wrong with that, But oops, the virus starting to get in. But apparently, the manufacturers of certain cosmetics make the bottle really look big, but inside there's just an itty-bitty thing right there. You essentially have an empty bottle that you're paying for. Well, that's what their words are. You see something that's so big, you say, wow, that's going to be weighty. You pick it up and say, wow, that's light as a feather. There's nothing in it. Blow up a balloon. That's what they are. Full of hot air. You see, because they have unhinged, unhooked, untethered, unanchored, I'll think of a few more uns in a minute, from the apostolic doctrine and apostolic teaching, there was no weight to their words. They had nothing to say. They were empty words because they were not filled with God's word. Fourth thing that you notice about these people is their method. When you got nothing, I love the little saying that says, when in doubt, scream and shout. When you got nothing to say, you got to figure out a way to get people to listen to you. And you know how you do that? You fool them. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about politicians, but they do come to mind at this point. We have a statesman in our church, Kevin Van Winkle, but there are a lot of politicians, and they're talking, you're going, yeah, you are just so full of nothing. Empty talkers. They are trying to do something. They are trying to deceive you in order that you will take the virus. See that? That's what a false teacher does. They use deception. And by the way, this is a compound word that has the idea it brings mind or heart into the word deception. So it means a mind deceiver. How many of y'all believe a man can saw a woman in half and she still live? I've seen it done. I saw that woman get in that thing. He took a saw that went through a watermelon, and then he went right through the middle of the woman. They separated it, and her feet are doing this thing. Her hands are doing this thing. I said, Shazam, Barney. How's he going to get her back together? And you know what he did? He hooked her back together. Michael really thinks this is happening. Michael, we planned that marvelously, didn't we? What does a magician do? He deceives you. We were in, Cindy and I thought I had the video somewhere of it. It was a great little video. We were in San Francisco, and we're on the street and watching one of those buskers where they put a pea under a cup, and they do this, and then you pick the cup. And I watched that man for 30 minutes, and I got it wrong every time. You know what I did next time? I pulled out my iPhone. I just started filming him. I stood back because he was giving me the stink eye. I filmed him on my iPhone. And you know what I did? I filmed him in slow motion. And I watched that man. He was doing this. And in slow motion, he's doing this. Puts the pea in his pocket. And then he does this. Puts the pea right back in there. He deceived me. I'm amazed at that, how easily we're deceived. And yet, you know what? We believe it after a while. Turn with me in your Bibles. Let me show you something. This is good stuff. Turn with me to 1 Timothy. Just put it in reverse and you'll find it. 1 Timothy 4. Paul's writing to Timothy. Timothy's at a church in Ephesus. And I want you to see what Paul says to Timothy about these false teachers, about their methods, if you will. What does he say? 1 Timothy 4, starting in verse 1. But the Spirit explicitly says that in latter times, whatever, some will fall away from the faith. I believe these are Christians falling away. Now notice how they do it. Paying attention to, and I want you to notice two things: deceitful spirits and doctrines of demons. Deceitful spirits and doctrines of demons. You see what he's saying? He's saying that Satan first deceives you, and then secondly, he indoctrinates you. He uses his false teachers to deceive you, to get you to think that a man can saw a woman in half and she can still wiggle her toes. She ain't got no brain to those toes, but she's wiggling them. And that's what happens. If you start looking at some of the crazy doctrines that are found in Mormonism, crazy doctrines that are found in Islam, crazy doctrines that are found with Jehovah's Witnesses, there's no way you would immediately believe those things unless you were deceived into indoctrination. So remember, they unhinge. The masses are in the lie. They unhinge from apostolic authority and revelation. They have words that have nothing to them, so they have to deceive you. Pay no attention to the man behind the screen. But I want you to notice the next thing is their message. Notice what he says here. Their message. As he's talking, he makes this statement. He says, especially those of the circumcision. Now, when he says especially, he means that it's not just the circumcision, but those that are of the circumcision are the ones who are really doing it. Now, the circumcision was either Jews that had never become believers, or they were believing Jews that thought that Moses was the gateway to salvation. You see, any cult, any ism, whether it be Mormonism, whether it be Hinduism, whatever it is, anyone will deny cardinal truths from the Bible. They'll reject such things as the Trinity. If you reject the Trinity, that is non-orthodoxy. You are no longer Christian Christian in your belief if you reject the Trinity. If you reject the deity of Jesus Christ, you've rejected a cardinal doctrine of Christianity. And the reason you reject those goes all the way back to being unhinged, unhooked, untethered from the apostolic revelation. Turn with me to Acts the 15th chapter. Let me show you these Judaizers, what I'm talking about. Acts 15, verse 1. Some men came down from Judea. Now, the reason they're coming down from Judea, because you always came down from Jerusalem. These are from Jerusalem. And began teaching the brethren, Christians. And here's what they were teaching. Unless you are circumcised according to the custom of Moses, you cannot be saved. And when Paul and Barnabas had great dissension and debate with them, I would have loved to have been in on that debate. See Paul going at these Judaizers. With great dissension and debate with them, the brethren determined that Paul and Barnabas and some others of them should go up to Jerusalem and to the apostles and the elders concerning this issue. We're moving into what is called the Jerusalem Council in the Bible. That's what it's called. Therefore, being sent on their way by the church, they were passing through both Phoenicia and Samaria, describing in detail the conversion of the Gentiles. See, that was a problem. They were letting our type in the club. Gentiles. You got to understand, in the beginning, you had to be Jewish to get in the country club. Gentiles weren't allowed. All right? Because we weren't Jews. He says, and the conversion of the Gentiles, and were bringing great joy to all the brethren. When they arrived in Jerusalem, they were received by the church and the apostles and the elders and the report all that God had done with them. But some of the sect of the Pharisees who had, what does it say there? They were they Christians? You bet they were. They believed. But they were infected. Notice what it says. Believe stood up saying, it is necessary. It's not optional. It's necessary. I started to say equipment, but that'd be a poor choice of words. It is necessary to circumcise them and to direct them to observe the law of Moses. Now you see, this is what all false teachers do in their message. They may smudge around with the Trinity, they may smudge around with the deity, but where every ism or false religion, Mormonism, Hinduism, Islam, they all go awry is they say salvation is through doing something. It is never grace, period. It is always grace plus something. You sure believe in Jesus, but you got to be circumcised first. Rather than just flat out nothing else but believing in Jesus. Michael had a delightful conversation with a lady on the phone this week. And she's saying, are you saying that at Crosspoint, you all believe that someone can become a Christian and not understand fully the doctrine of the substitutionary atonement of Christ? And Michael said, yes. You did say that, didn't you? Okay, good. I just want to be sure. I'm just trying to figure out if Michael was going to be on staff next week. He will be. And she says, wait a minute, you mean you can become a believer without understanding everything about the cross? I'll never forget, there was a great seminar, Dr. Oral Rodmacher, a great champion of grace, period, was in a big symposium. He was speaking. They were debating this very issue. And so he said, I'd like to ask a question of all my fellow table sitters here at the symposium. He says, do you think it is possible that someone could have eternal life without understanding the doctrine of substitutionary atonement? No one raised their hands except Dr. Rodmacher. He says, I kind of got to do that because otherwise the disciples weren't saved. Think about that. Woman at the well, she wasn't saved. Did he explain the substitute? No. Listen, let me tell you something, people. Let me explain something to you. I have no clue how internal combustion engines work. There is a science, and I read about it. I can't even explain it to you, but there's oxygen molecules, and they ignite. It brings heat and fire, but you know what I know? It gets me to my destination. All I do is turn on it, and I go, I don't understand everything behind it, but I understand this car, I believe in this car, will get me to where I want to go. You see, every false religion will add something to do besides believe in Christ. It always adds. And because of that, you will never have assurance of salvation. If you think you've got to do something, you've got to stay faithful all your life, you'll never know whether you're going to be saved. What in the last month of your life you decide to chuck Jesus and everything else? You are saved. You may be a little singed at the Bema seat, but you're saved. Every false religion does that. Let's move on. We move quicker now. Well, I don't know, Michael. I mean, you tell me that you're not used to getting out of church at 11:15. I may go on African-American time here in a minute. Let me show you what else got to happen. Notice the mandate. What does he say here? He says the mandate is who must be silenced. Now, he's not talking about off with their heads type silence. I believe there's two things he's probably talking about. But one thing is unequivocally, he says, you cannot allow this virus. It's kind of like, say, someone's got a cold or a cough or a flu, and they say, well, it's just a little cough. It's just a little flu. Now, do you want to hang out with that person? He's just got a little bit of it. But you see, no, quarantine, silence. There's two ways you can do that in Scripture. One is through church discipline, Matthew 18, Galatians 5. Or you go to that brother and you say, you know what you're teaching doesn't line up. You've unhinged, unhooked, untethered from apostolic authority and doctrine. It doesn't go with that. Or the other thing, you can sit down with him, as Paul said, correcting those who in opposition with gentleness in order that they might come to the truth. You just sit down with the brother. You know what some of my saddest times are? When someone takes a position that I happen to believe is unbiblical. I'm not going to even go into what, it could be anything. But I said, could we just sit down and look at what the Bible has to say? I don't want to read your teachers, and I'm not going to let you read my teachers. Let's just look at what the Bible, and people don't do that. You see, the mandate is you silence false teachers, either by sharing the truth with them and getting enough truth in them that they know how to start living by it, rather than in being infected by the lie. Next is, I want you to notice, not only is that, but there is a mayhem that this causes. See, the more of the lie that you have in you, the more, as I think Scott Peck said, the more that you become people of the lie, rather than people of the truth, it has a deleterious, it's bad for you. It's bad for you. Effect on you and your family. Notice what it says in that next passage. It says, upsetting entire families. The word upset is used of Jesus overturning the tables in the temple. I believe families are being upset today. I believe families are being overturned today. I believe the lie is infecting families and turning them upside down. Because when Satan destroys the family, he destroys the community, he destroys the society. And our society is a breeder, a contagion of what? Not the truth, but the lie. And you see, doctrine does matter. What you believe will inevitably affect what you do. And if you believe the lie, you'll become sicker and sicker and sicker. Next, their motive, as it says, is for sordid gain. This was one of the things that we saw last week, that an elder should not be fond of, sordid gain. In other words, ill-gotten gains. You see, what these false teachers were doing is grabbing enough devotees that they could leech off of them. You see, a true shepherd cares about the sheep, not the shepherd. A true shepherd says he is willing to do what with his life? A false teacher wants everybody else to lay down. That's why. I don't get it, people. I don't know how you don't know Islam is a lie. When you've got mothers strapping bombs to their children and sending them to blow themselves up. That is a lie out of hell. Next, we conclude this section, and the next section, be not worried or in despair, it goes quicker. There was the means or the median or the commonality among Cretans. Notice what he says about these Cretans. He says in verse 12, one of themselves a prophet of their own. In other words, he's a Cretan. Said Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, and lazy gluttons. Now, one of the things that I wondered about this is ironic. Here's a Cretan that's saying that Cretans are always lying. Well, is he lying when he's saying that? But you see, those that lived in Crete were some of the most ill thought of people in the world. This is really true. And that's why the Apostle Paul in the first part of verse 13 says, this is a true statement. He says, what I'm saying is, this is what one of their own actually said about him. It'd be kind of like me coming up to you and, talking about someone you know and say, you will not believe what this person did. This person did. He's a dud. What he did. And if I told you that, you might say, what? No, you're kidding me. I'd say, no, man, that's a true statement. I saw it. You see, what he is saying is one of their own even said, we're all liars, we're all evil beasts, we're all lazy gluttons. Let me remind you of something. We're all Cretans. We're all Cretans. Apart from Jesus Christ, we are liars. We are evil beasts. And we're lazy gluttons. I love that. What a beautiful word picture a lazy glutton is. Most of the time a glutton is going, he's going, I'm going to sit back and you feed me. I'm too lazy to eat myself. Just cram food into me. See, that's a terrible place to be when you just want someone to fill up your gut with junk food, the lie. John the 8th chapter, as I've mentioned, Satan is the father of lies. Evil beast, Satan comes only, John 10, to steal, kill, and destroy. We are all Cretans before we meet Christ. Now, how do you deal with this? He tells us in the next 3 verses. He tells us how to deal with a false teacher. Look what he says. First is correction. He says, for this reason, reprove them. Now, I think when he says for this reason, he says, listen, we're all in the same sorry, sinking boat. You should have some compassion on these people. Even one of their own threw them under the bus, called them liars, evil beasts, and lazy gluttons. For this reason, have some compassion on these people and do something. And what does he say do? He says, reprove them severely. Now, reprove is to point out where you're wrong. But he said do it severely. Now, you might think, well, that's not very loving. No, that can be the most loving thing you do. If you go in and you are destroying your health and your physician says, you're going to die in another month if you don't change what you're doing. He just reproved you severely. Now, what is he supposed to reprove them about? What are we supposed to point out? He tells us. Look, it's right there in the text. He says, reprove them that they may be sound in the faith. We want to get you healthy again. Remember soundness, that hugiagio, the idea of being hygienic. We want you to be. Now, but here's the lie. Look at verse 14. They were imbibing, they were being infected by myths and madness. Notice what it says. Not paying attention to Jewish myths. Jews had all kinds of myths. I mean, they'd sprung up, they would talk. You can read Jewish myths left and right. And they were living their lives based upon a myth. Or secondly, the commandments of men. Not of God, but of men. And the Jews added to the commandments and the commandments and commandments. Those are commandments of men, thinking that would make them a better Jew. But notice what it says. Why are they doing this? In order to do that, they have to turn away from the truth. I had a young man in my office this morning, and I was chatting with him. Michael knows him quite well. It's his eldest son. He's not here right now. But as I was chatting with younger Michael, he asked me a question. And I said, and he asked me a bunch of questions, I might add, which that's good. I love questions. And that's how you discover stuff. And he was looking in my office and just making observations. That's a Bible scholar right there. And so he asked me this question. He said, by the way, do you know how, and he asked me if I knew how to do something. I said, no, that's above my pay grade. He said, aren't you the head guy here? I said, yep, I am. He said, you don't know how to do that? I said, nope, no idea. How come? I said, man, you ask a lot of questions. I didn't say that. What I said was, there's only so much stuff I can keep in this old brain of mine. And what is not of utmost necessity, I don't keep. And you see, if you take myths and madness into your brain, you'll never have room for the message of life. That's what he's saying. So the next thing you've got to do is you've got to explain to them their confusion. See, they had bought into these myths, this madness, the commandments of men, rather than the message of God. Myths, madness, or message. They bought into the first two, not the second. Notice they thought that all these myths and commandments would make them a better person. That's what he says here in verse 5. He says, to the pure, and this is, and I'm going to take you and do a little Greek on you right here. This is called a chiasm. A chiasm, just think of a key, that's our chi or key. That's an X in the Greek language. So it's an argument that starts here, goes here, goes here, goes here. These two things balance, and these two middle things balance. So notice that. What he's saying is, he says, to the pure. And the word there is katharos. That is, you've been cleansed by Jesus Christ. You are a believer. To the pure, all things are pure. To the pure, all things are pure. To the pure, next step, all things are pure. In other words, if you fed on the truth, you understand what purity is. You understand that there are some things right and some things wrong. Now notice what he says secondly. But, it's an adversive. It's contrasting. But, here's your third line. To those who are defiled and what? Unbelieving. I think he's probably talking about unbelievers in Christ. Although this can happen to a believer, I believe. Unbelieving, nothing is pure. But notice what he says, fourth line, but their mind and their conscience are defiled. Pure, mind and conscience defiled. All things are pure, middle, third line in there. You see, what he's saying is this, is if you have not fed on the truth, you are becoming defiled. In your mind and your conscience. What does that mean? That means how you go about living your life. It's screwed up. Your brain is screwed up. Your conscience tells you what is right and what is wrong. That's screwed up. Because you fed on the lie, not the truth, your conscience is screwed up. And that's why our society is so screwed up today. Final thing that he says here, he says their confession, and notice what? He says, listen, on the outside, he says they profess to know God. The Greek word is homologeo. Means to say the same thing. John and I were talking about this passage this week, and they profess to know God, but by their deeds they deny him, being detestable, disobedient, and worthless for any good deed. They profess to know God. You know, there's very few people that say, hey, do you believe? Yeah, I believe in God. Notice it didn't say they profess to know Christ. It's just God. As John and I were talking about this passage this weekend, he made the statement, he says, you know, I'm sure before his conversion, the Apostle Paul professed to know God. But he didn't know Christ. Notice, and they're trying to do things that are trying to affirm this profession. But he says in the very things that they do, they're denying God. For instance, when Paul was going about killing Christians, he thought those were good deeds. But by doing that, he's actually doing what? Denying God. And I want you to notice how God gives the health inspection. I love that show. I love to watch those health inspection reports. I love to watch those things. I miss it sometimes. And I want to see what restaurant I'm eating in, how many bugs it's got. I mean, I really think those things are so cool. How many rodent droppings are, they found 15 rodent droppings in my restaurant. I can deal with 15, 20, I would never go back. But notice the three things this health inspection report says. It says, number one is, they are detestable, they are disobedient, and they're worthless. The word worthless is adakimazo, or adakimos. In Greece and Rome, if they had a stone that they were going to build in and it had a crack that people couldn't see, you know what they do? They would tattoo, if you will, or cut into it an A. Adakimos. Unapproved. Failed the test. You see, false teachers fail the test because they've been unhinged, unhooked, untethered from the truth. Wrap it up with three little. There is a lot of viruses in our culture. It is incumbent upon church leadership to point out where the truth is and where the lie is. My second thing. Thank you. Dr. Elder. That's what elders are supposed to do. They were supposed to be sure that we're supposed to be sure. And we've got great elders here. And we got Randy and we've got Brad. They are great elders. And then we've got a few more elders. Where's Rich? Rich, there you are. Are all the elders here? There's Terry. Randy's not. Randy was here, I thought, earlier. I was going to. Rich, the rest of you guys stand up. Just stand up. Rich, please. Rich, go ahead. Stand up. That's what they're supposed to do, is to watch over the health. Let me tell you something. In order to survive the lie, you've got to be vaccinated. You've got to get the shot. If you've never believed in Jesus Christ, you are helpless to the lie. But may I suggest to you that every Sunday we give you a booster. Now, my wife, and I'm going to tell you this, she has never gotten, I think one time maybe, a flu vaccine. Did you do it once? One time. My wife will also never get a tattoo for the same reason. She hates needles. And whether you get vaccinated or inked, you're getting a needle somewhere. See, we're going to give you a booster shot every Sunday. We're going to teach you the truth that's why we came into existence. But you need to take your truth pill every day of the week, lest you be infected. Join me in a word of prayer.